Hyeji stared at the screen until her eyes burned. The numbers didn't make sense. For 3 hours, she had been looking at the same pattern of signals coming from deep space. They were too clean, too perfect. Natural space noise was messy and random. This was different. She worked alone in the Seoul Interspecies Research Institute. It was past midnight, and the building was empty except for the security guards. The alien communication networks hummed quietly around her, processing data from across the galaxy. Most people thought her job was boring. She listened to space static and filed reports that nobody read. But tonight was different. The signals appeared every 47 minutes and 12 seconds. Each pulse lasted exactly 3.7 seconds. The pattern repeated across 17 different frequencies at once. Nature didn't work that way. Someone was sending these signals on purpose. Hyeji saved the data and sent a message to her friend Jiwon. Even though it was late, she knew the xenobiologist would still be awake. Jiwon never slept much. She spent most nights in her lab studying alien biology samples that the hegemony allowed Earth to examine. 20 minutes later, Jiwon arrived with coffee and tired eyes. She was small and moved quickly, like a bird. Her lab coat had stains from whatever chemicals she had been working with. "What did you find?" Jiwon asked, sitting down next to Hyeji. "Listen to this." Hyeji played the recorded signals through the speakers. The sound was like whispers in an empty room, too quiet to understand, but too regular to ignore. Jiwon frowned. "That's not random." "No, it's not. And look at this." Hyeji showed her the frequency analysis. The signals are using the same quantum channels that the hegemony uses for their official communications. But they're hidden underneath the normal traffic. Hidden how? Someone is writing along with regular messages, like writing a secret note in invisible ink between the lines of a normal letter. The hegemony systems process the official messages and ignore these patterns because they're too weak to trigger the monitoring systems. Jiwon studied the data for several minutes. She had a good mind for puzzles. Who would do this? And why? I don't know. But whoever it is, they know the hegemony, communication systems very well, too well. They sat in silence, drinking coffee and thinking. Outside, Seoul slept peacefully under the protective dome that the hegemony had built around major Earth cities. The dome glowed softly, filtering out harmful radiation and keeping the weather perfect. It was a gift, the aliens said, a way to help humanity develop safely. "We should tell someone," Jiwon said finally. "Tell them what? That I found mysterious signals that might be nothing? The hegemony officials will just say, it's equipment malfunction or space interference. What about Minho? He used to work with alien technology. Maybe he can help." Hyeji nodded. Minho was a good choice. He had served in the military for 10 years before becoming a civilian contractor. The hegemony hired him to maintain their equipment on Earth. He understood their technology better than most humans. The next morning, they met at a small restaurant near the Institute. Minho arrived exactly on time, wearing a simple black suit. He was tall and serious with calm eyes that noticed everything. Old habits from his military days. "You look worried," he said, sitting down across from them. Hyeji explained about the signals. She showed him the data on her portable tablet, keeping her voice low. Other customers filled the restaurant, but most were reading news feeds or talking to family members through holographic displays. Minho studied the information carefully. His face didn't change expression, but his fingers drummed silently on the table. "This is definitely artificial," he said after a few minutes. Someone is broadcasting these signals on purpose. Can you tell who? Jiwan asked. Not from this data alone, but I know someone who might be able to help. Daiho works on theoretical physics. He studies faster-than-light communication systems. If anyone can analyze these signals properly, it's him. That afternoon, they met Daiho at his laboratory in the university district. He was younger than the others, with messy hair and coffee stains on his shirt. His office was filled with mathematical equations written on whiteboards and holographic displays showing complex geometric shapes. Fascinating, Daiho said after reviewing Hyeji's data. These signals are using quantum entanglement principles that shouldn't be possible with current technology. What do you mean? Hyeji asked. The hegemony taught us that quantum communication has certain limits. Messages can only travel so far before the entangled particles lose their connection. But these signals are coming from much further away than should be possible. He pointed to one of his displays, which showed a map of the galaxy. According to hegemony science, quantum communication works reliably within about 50 light-years. After that, the signal degrades and becomes useless. But your signals are coming from at least 200 light-years away, maybe more. So either the signals are fake, Minho said, or someone has better technology than the hegemony. The room became very quiet. The idea that anyone might have better technology than the hegemony was almost unthinkable. For 300 years, the alien coalition had maintained peace across the galaxy through their superior science and technology. They were the teachers, and younger species like humanity were the students. There's something else, Jiwan said. I've been finding strange things in my biological research. Some of the genetic samples the hegemony provides don't match their official records. She pulled up her own data on a tablet. They gave me samples from several extinct species that supposedly died out naturally thousands of years ago. But the genetic markers show signs of recent artificial modification. What kind of modification? Daiho asked. The kind that would make a species more docile and easier to control. Changes to brain chemistry and hormone production. Changes that would make them less likely to question authority or think independently. Minho leaned back in his chair. You're saying the hegemony modified these species? I'm saying someone did. And if these species were modified before they went extinct, then maybe they didn't die out naturally. The implications hung in the air like smoke. If Jiwan was right, then the hegemony's version of galactic history might not be completely true. And if Daiho was right about the signals, then someone with advanced technology was trying to communicate, without the hegemony knowing about it. We need to be careful, Minho said. If we're right about any of this, we're dealing with information that could be dangerous to possess. But we can't just ignore it, Hyeji replied. If someone is trying to send us a message, we should try to understand what they're saying. Daiho was already working on his computers, running the signal data through various analysis programs. Give me a few days to study this properly. I'll see if I can decode the signals or trace their origin. As they prepared to leave, Jiwan noticed something odd about the windows in Daiho's laboratory. The view outside showed the city dome, glowing softly in the afternoon sun. But there were small devices attached to the window frame, almost invisible unless you looked for them. What are those? She asked, pointing. Daiho glanced at the windows, and his face became serious. Monitoring equipment. The hegemony installs them in all research facilities. They say it's for our protection, to make sure our experiments don't accidentally create dangerous conditions. But they're watching everything we do, Hyeji said. Yes, they are. The four researchers looked at each other with new understanding. They were living in a peaceful, protected world, but they were also living in a watched world, and now they had discovered something that their watchers might not want them to know. The signals continued broadcasting their mysterious message into the void, waiting for someone brave enough to listen. 3 days passed before Deho called them back to his laboratory. This time, he had cleared his whiteboards and covered the windows with thick black paper. The monitoring devices were still there, but now they couldn't see inside the room. "I found something," he said as soon as they arrived. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, and empty coffee cups covered his desk. "The signals aren't random. They're coordinates." He showed them a three-dimensional star map floating above his desk. Dozens of red dots marked locations throughout the galaxy. Each signal pulse contains location data, specific star systems hidden in the quantum patterns. "What's at those locations?" Minho asked. "I don't know yet, but I cross-referenced them with the hegemony's official star charts. According to their records, most of these systems are empty space, or contain only dead planets." Jiwon stepped closer to examine the map. "But if someone is broadcasting coordinates to dead systems, there must be a reason. Maybe they're not as dead as the hegemony claims," Hyeji suggested. Deho nodded. "That's what I'm thinking. Someone wants us to know about these places, but they can't communicate directly. So they're sending us a treasure map instead." Over the past 3 days, Jiwon had been conducting her own research. She had requested additional biological samples from the hegemony archives, focusing on the extinct species that showed signs of genetic modification. The results troubled her deeply. "I found 12 more species with the same modifications," she told the group, "all supposedly extinct, all showing evidence of artificial genetic changes that would have made them more passive and compliant." She activated her tablet and displayed genetic sequences that looked like twisted ribbons of light. "Look at this pattern. It appears in every single sample. Someone systematically altered the brain chemistry of these species before they disappeared." "The same someone who wanted them extinct?" Minho asked. "It looks that way. But here's the strange part. The genetic work is incredibly sophisticated, more advanced than anything the hegemony has taught us about genetic engineering." Deho frowned. "So either the hegemony has been hiding their real capabilities, or someone else did this work." "There's more," Jiwon continued. "I found references to some of these species in old archaeological records. They weren't primitive. They had advanced civilizations, space travel, complex technologies. But according to hegemony history, they were all backward species that died out naturally." The group fell silent. The implications were becoming clearer and more disturbing. If Jiwon was right, then the hegemony had been deliberately falsifying galactic history. And if these advanced species had been deliberately eliminated, then the peaceful galaxy they lived in was built on lies and murder. "We need more information," Minho said. "But we can't research this using official channels. The hegemony monitors all academic databases and research requests." That's when Hyeji suggested they contact Sun Wu. Sun Wu worked as a network maintenance technician for the Seoul Information Hub. Officially, his job was to repair communication systems and update software. Unofficially, he was one of the best computer hackers on Earth. He had learned to navigate digital systems the way others learned to read books. They met him at an underground gaming center in the old part of the city. The place was dark and loud, filled with people playing virtual reality games and online competitions. It was the perfect place for a private conversation because the noise made electronic surveillance difficult. Sun Wu was thin and pale, with quick hands that never stopped moving. He listened to their story while playing 3 different computer games at the same time. His attention split between their conversation and the glowing screens around him. "You want me to hack hegemony databases," he said without looking away, "from his games. That's not just illegal, that's suicidal." "We're not asking you to steal military secrets," Ji-Wan said. "We just need access to historical records that might not be available through normal channels." "Historical records are often the most dangerous secrets of all," Sun Wu replied. But he was already thinking about the challenge. Hacking hegemony. Systems would be the ultimate test of his skills. After an hour of discussion, he agreed to help. But he had conditions. They would meet only in secure locations. They would never discuss their research over electronic communications. And if he discovered that the hegemony was actively hunting for whoever was asking these questions, he would disappear immediately. 2 days later, Sun Wu made his first breakthrough. He had managed to access archived files from the hegemony's internal databases, not the public records that everyone could see, but the private files that were supposed to be restricted to high-level officials. "The official story is bullshit," he told them during their next meeting. "I found internal communications from 300 years ago. The hegemony didn't just discover these extinct species after they were already dead, they were in direct contact with them." He showed them translated documents on a secure tablet that couldn't connect to any networks. "Look at this. It's a diplomatic message from something called the Keth Confederation. They were refusing to join the hegemony voluntarily. They said they preferred their independence and wanted to develop their own path." "What happened to them?" Daeho asked. "According to these files, the hegemony gave them an ultimatum. Join willingly or be forcibly integrated. The Keth chose to fight. And they lost. They didn't just lose. They were completely erased. Not just defeated, eliminated so thoroughly that no trace of their civilization remains in the official records." Sun Wu showed them more documents. The pattern was always the same. Advanced species would be contacted by the hegemony and offered membership in their peaceful coalition. If they agreed, they would gradually be integrated into hegemony society, their technologies absorbed and their populations relocated to controlled worlds. If they refused, they would face increasing pressure. Economic sanctions, technological interference, diplomatic isolation. And if they still resisted, they would be eliminated completely. "How many species?" Hyeji asked. "I've found records of at least 47 advanced civilizations that refused integration. All of them are now listed as extinct in the public databases." The weight of this information settled over them like a heavy blanket. The peaceful galaxy they had grown up in wasn't peaceful at all. It was the result of systematic conquest and genocide, hidden behind gentle words about unity and cooperation. "There's something else," Sun Wu continued. "I found references to something called the Remnant Protocol. It seems to be some kind of emergency plan for survivors of eliminated species." "What kind of plan?" "I don't have details yet. The files are heavily encrypted and stored in the deepest levels of the database. But from what I can tell, some members of the eliminated species managed to escape before their worlds were destroyed." Daeho looked up from his notes. "The signals? The coordinates? What if they're coming from survivors who are still hiding somewhere in those empty systems?" It was a terrifying and hopeful possibility at the same time. If there were survivors of the hegemony's secret war, then they might have valuable information. They might even be planning some kind of resistance. But it also meant that Earth was probably next on the list. "We need to find out more about this." "Remnant Protocol," Minho said. And we need to understand what the hegemony's real plans are for humanity. Jiwan had been quiet during most of the discussion, but now she spoke up. I think we should also contact Nari. She's an archaeologist who specializes in pre-hegemony civilizations. If anyone can help us understand what these extinct species were really like, it's her. As they prepared to leave the gaming center, Sunwoo gave them a warning. I'm going to keep digging, but you need to be more careful. I found evidence that the hegemony monitors Earth much more closely than they admit publicly. They're not just protecting us from outside threats. They're studying us. Studying us for what? Hyeji asked. I don't know yet, but based on what I've seen, I don't think they plan to let us develop independently much longer. The group split up, each returning to their normal lives and jobs. But everything had changed. They now knew that their peaceful world was built on the bones of murdered civilizations. And somewhere in the dark spaces between the stars, the survivors of those civilizations were trying to make contact. The question was, would humanity listen to their message in time to avoid the same fate? Nari met them at an excavation site outside the city dome. She was digging through ruins that predated the hegemony's arrival on Earth. The site was officially classified as studying early human civilization, but Nari had discovered something else entirely. She was a small woman with dirt under her fingernails and excitement in her eyes. When she saw the group approaching, she waved them over to a covered area where she had been working with strange metal fragments. You're going to want to see this, she said, holding up a piece of crystalline material that seemed to glow with its own light. I found this buried 30 meters down, in rock layers that are definitely older than human civilization. Jiwan examined the crystal carefully. It was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with a steady rhythm. This isn't from Earth. No, it's not. And it's not from any hegemony species either. I've compared it to every known alien material in the databases. This is something completely different. Nari led them deeper into the excavation site. The dig had revealed the remains of what looked like a crashed spacecraft, buried for thousands of years. But the technology was unlike anything they had seen before. The design is completely different from hegemony ships, she explained, pointing to curved walls and organic-looking control panels. Their technology is all straight lines and geometric shapes. This is more flowing, more natural. Daiho knelt down to examine some of the recovered equipment. The metal composition is incredible. It's lighter than aluminum, but stronger than steel. And look at these energy conduits. They're still functional after being buried for millennia. I think this ship belonged to one of the species that was eliminated, Nari said. Someone crashed here long before the hegemony officially made contact with Earth. They might have been trying to hide, or maybe they were studying humanity. As they explored the ruins, Hyeji's communications equipment began picking up something unusual. The mysterious signals that had started their investigation were getting stronger near the alien wreckage. The signals are definitely connected to this place, she said, adjusting her scanners. They're almost like an echo, bouncing off the metal in the ship. Suddenly, her equipment erupted with activity. The signals weren't just echoing. They were responding. Something was actively communicating with them through the ancient alien technology. The group gathered around Hyeji's equipment as strange symbols appeared on her screens. The patterns were complex and beautiful, unlike any language they had seen. But gradually the symbols began changing, becoming simpler and more familiar. It's learning, Daiho whispered. Whatever is sending these signals is adapting to our language and communication methods in real time. After several minutes, recognizable words began appearing on the screen. Finally, someone listening, have waited long time. The group stared at the message in shock. First contact with an alien intelligence, and it was happening in a buried excavation site through equipment that had been dead for thousands of years. Hyeji typed a response. Who are you? Survivors. Remnant of many. Hidden in dark spaces. Watching. Hegemony. Waiting for right time. Where are you? Jiwan typed. Between stars. In empty places. Hegemony thinks we are all dead. We let them think this. Minyo leaned over the keyboard. Why are you contacting us now? Because time runs short. Hegemony prepares to integrate Earth, like they did to us, like they did to 47 others. The confirmation of their worst fears sent a chill through the group. The hegemony wasn't protecting humanity. They were preparing to absorb them into their empire. Humanity is different, the message continued. Evolved without hegemony control, have abilities they fear. What abilities? Deho typed. Chaos, unpredictability, independent thought. Hegemony controls through making species predictable, humans still wild. Nari looked up from studying the alien writing system. They're right about that. Every hegemony species I've studied shows signs of genetic or cultural modification that makes them more uniform, more controllable. But humans are still incredibly diverse. Diversity is weapon, the signals continued. Hegemony cannot predict what they cannot understand, cannot control what changes too fast. The conversation continued for hours. The remnant explained that they were not a single species, but survivors from dozens of different civilizations that had been eliminated by the hegemony. They had spent centuries hiding in the dark spaces between stars, slowly building their strength and waiting for an opportunity. Hegemony. Peace is lie, they told the humans. Control through making all species think same way. Modify genetics. To reduce aggression. Modify culture to increase compliance. Make everyone happy slaves. But why haven't they done that to Earth already? Hyeji asked. Studying you, learning how natural species develops, using humans as control group for experiments. The implications were horrifying. Humanity wasn't being protected. They were being preserved as laboratory specimens. The hegemony wanted to understand how an unmodified species functioned before they decided whether to integrate or eliminate them. Time almost up, the remnant warned. Hegemony fleet moving to Earth system. Integration begins soon. What can we do? Minho typed urgently. Fight, but not alone. We have ships, have weapons, have knowledge of hegemony weaknesses, but need human unpredictability to break their control systems. The remnant explained that the hegemony's greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. They had created a perfectly ordered society where everything was predictable and controlled. Their military tactics, their technology, even their thinking. Patterns followed rigid rules and protocols. Their computers predict behavior based on 300 years of data. But data only covers controlled species, cannot predict truly free species. So our chaos is actually an advantage? Jiwan asked. Yes. Human creativity and stubbornness will break their prediction models. Human tendency to question authority will inspire other species to remember their freedom. But the remnant also warned them about the integration process. It had already begun on Earth, though most humans didn't realize it. The protective domes around major cities weren't just filtering out radiation. They were gradually introducing chemicals that would make the population more docile and compliant. hegemony. Never forces integration, they explained. Always makes species choose it voluntarily, makes them think it was their idea. The food supplies, the medical treatments, the educational programs that the hegemony had introduced to Earth all contained subtle modifications designed to gradually change human behavior and biology. Within a generation, humanity would be just as controllable as any other hegemony species. Unless we stop them first, Minho said grimly. Stopping not enough, the remnant replied. Must break entire system, free all species, restore galaxy to natural state. They began making plans. The remnant would provide intelligence about hegemony military movements and technological weaknesses. The humans would work to awaken resistance, movements on Earth, and find ways to counter the integration process. Will be dangerous, the remnant warned. Hegemony will not give up control easily. Will use all weapons to maintain order. What about the other species under hegemony control? Nari asked. Can they be freed? Some can be saved. Genetic modifications can be reversed if treated quickly. Cultural programming takes longer to break, but possible with time and patience. As the communication session ended, the remnant gave them detailed coordinates for hidden bases and supply caches scattered throughout the galaxy. They also provided technical specifications for countering hegemony surveillance and communication systems. Remember, was their final message, hegemony expects compliance or resistance, does not expect chaos. Use your humanity as weapon. The ancient alien equipment powered down, leaving the group in silence among the buried ruins. They now had allies, but they also had confirmation that Earth was in immediate danger. The peaceful life they had known was about to end, whether they won or lost. We need to warn people, Hyeji said. The whole planet needs to know what's coming. Warning them won't be enough, Minho replied. We need to start building a resistance, and we need to do it without the hegemony realizing what we're doing. As they climbed out of the excavation site, each of them carried the weight of terrible knowledge. The galaxy was not the peaceful place they had believed it to be, and humanity's greatest test was about to begin. The hegemony ships appeared in Earth's sky 3 weeks later. They came silently, materializing out of faster-than-light travel like massive silver flowers blooming against the stars. Each ship was the size of a small city, their surfaces smooth and perfect, reflecting sunlight in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The official announcement came within hours. The Hegemony Council had decided that humanity was ready for full integration into galactic society. It was presented as a wonderful opportunity: access to advanced technology, unlimited energy, perfect health care, and an end to poverty and war. Most humans celebrated. The news feeds were filled with experts explaining how integration would solve all of Earth's problems. Government leaders praised the hegemony's generosity and wisdom. Plans were made for celebration parades in every major city. But Jiwon and her team knew the truth. They watched the announcements from Diho's laboratory, which they had turned into their secret headquarters. The windows were still covered, and they had built devices to block electronic surveillance using technology the Remnant had taught them. "Look at the timing," Minho said, pointing to a news display showing the hegemony ships. They announced the integration just as those chemical modifications in our food supply reached peak effectiveness. Most of the population is already primed to accept whatever they're told. Sunwoo had been working around the clock to track the integration process. His hacking had revealed the true scope of what was happening. "It's not just the food and air filters," he reported. They've been modifying our entertainment, our education systems, even our social media algorithms. Everything has been designed to make humans more compliant and less likely to question authority. But it's not working on everyone, Hyeji observed. I've been monitoring resistance groups around the world. Thousands of people are reporting that something feels wrong about the integration announcement. Their instincts are telling them to be suspicious. This was exactly what the remnant had predicted. Humans who were naturally more independent or paranoid were partially resisting the chemical and psychological modifications. These people were forming the core of a growing underground resistance movement. Nari had been studying the integration process by examining historical records of how it had worked on other species. The pattern is always the same, she explained. First, they make the species grateful by solving some of their problems. Then they slowly take over all major institutions. Finally, they modify the population so thoroughly that resistance becomes impossible. How long do we have? Deho asked. Based on what happened to other species, maybe 6 months before the modifications become irreversible. After that, humanity as we know it will be gone forever. The team had spent the weeks since first contact with the remnant building a network of resistance cells across the planet. It was dangerous work. They had to identify people who were naturally resistant to the hegemony's modifications while avoiding detection by the surveillance systems that monitored every major city. Minho had taken charge of the military aspects of their preparations. His experience with alien technology allowed him to train small groups of humans in using weapons and equipment that the remnant had provided. The training took place in remote locations, far from the protective domes where hegemony sensors were strongest. Human tactical thinking is completely different from hegemony species, he told his trainees during one session. They expect organized, predictable military formations. We're going to give them chaos instead. The humans learned to fight using small, independent units that could change their plans instantly. They practiced hit-and-run attacks, sabotage operations, and guerrilla warfare tactics that the hegemony's rigid military doctrine couldn't counter effectively. Meanwhile, Hyeji and Sunwoo worked on disrupting the communication networks that the hegemony used to coordinate their operations. They had discovered that the alien systems relied heavily on predictable protocols and standardized responses. Human creativity could break these systems by introducing unexpected variables. Their computers are incredibly powerful, Sunwoo explained, but they're programmed to expect logical behavior. When we do something completely irrational, their systems crash trying to process it. They developed computer viruses that used human humor, art, and music to confuse alien artificial intelligence systems. The programs would inject random poetry, jokes, and abstract art into military communication channels, causing the hegemony computers to waste processing power trying to find hidden meanings that didn't exist. Jiwon focused on the biological aspects of the resistance. She had been developing treatments to reverse the genetic modifications that the hegemony was introducing into the human population. Working with samples the remnant had provided, she created medicines that could restore natural human brain chemistry and immune system function. The modifications aren't permanent yet, she told the team during one of their meetings. We can still save most of the population if we act quickly enough. But distributing the treatments was dangerous. The hegemony monitored all medical supplies and would quickly detect any unauthorized medications. Jiwon had to work with underground networks of doctors and nurses who were willing to risk their careers to help preserve human independence. The resistance grew slowly but steadily. People from all walks of life joined the movement. Teachers who noticed their students becoming unnaturally obedient, artists who felt their creativity being suppressed, scientists who realized their research was being subtly guided toward predetermined conclusions. Each new member brought their own skills and knowledge. Engineers sabotaged infrastructure projects that would give the hegemony more control over human cities. Farmers spread Jiwan's treatments through food distribution networks. Communications workers helped Hyeji and Sunwoo expand their signal disruption operations. But the hegemony was not idle. As the integration process continued, their control over human institutions became stronger. Government leaders became increasingly enthusiastic about hegemony policies. Media outlets stopped reporting any negative news about the integration. Anyone who spoke out against the process found themselves marginalized or silenced. They're moving faster than expected, Nari reported during one of their meetings. I'm seeing signs that they're preparing to begin the final phase of integration. The final phase would involve direct genetic modification of the entire human population. Massive medical centers were being built in every major city, supposedly to provide free health care to everyone on Earth. But the Remnant had warned them that these centers were actually processing facilities designed to alter human DNA on a species-wide scale. Once they begin the final phase, we'll have maybe 2 weeks before the changes become permanent, Jiwan said. After that, humans will be physically incapable of independent thought or resistance. The team realized they were running out of time. Their resistance network was still too small and poorly equipped to challenge the hegemony directly, but the Remnant had promised to help when the time was right. They're waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves, Hyeji explained. If they attack too early, the hegemony will have time to bring in reinforcements from across the galaxy. If they wait too long, humanity will be lost forever. The moment came sooner than expected. Hegemony officials announced that mandatory health screenings would begin in all major cities within the week. Every human would be required to visit the new medical centers for optimization treatments that would eliminate disease and extend lifespan. The team knew this was the beginning of the final phase. They had to act immediately or watch their species disappear forever. Send the signal to the Remnant, Minho said. Tell them it's time. Hyeji activated the communication equipment they had built using alien technology. The message was simple but carried the weight of humanity's future. We're ready to fight. The response came back immediately. Ships moving to attack positions. Begin disruption operations in 3 hours. Remember, chaos is your strength. Use it. As the team prepared for what might be humanity's last battle, they could see hegemony ships moving into position above Earth's major cities. The peaceful integration was about to become a war for the soul of the human species. Outside their hidden laboratory, most of humanity continued their daily lives, unaware that their existence as a free species hung in the balance. But in the darkness between the stars, ancient enemies prepared to settle a score that had been building for 300 years. The quiet was about to end. The attack began at exactly midnight, coordinated across 17 different star systems simultaneously. Remnant ships materialized out of the dark spaces between stars, their hulls scarred from centuries of hiding, but their weapons fully charged. They had been waiting 300 years for this moment. On Earth, the first sign of battle came as the city domes began flickering and failing. Sunwoo's computer viruses had infected the hegemony control systems, replacing tactical data with human poetry and music. The alien computers struggled to process Shakespeare's sonnets while trying to coordinate planetary defenses. The communications grid is collapsing, Hyeji reported from her monitoring station. Their ships can't talk to each other properly. Every time they try to send military orders, the system translates them into song lyrics or jokes. Above Seoul, Massive hegemony warships found themselves unable to target human resistance positions because their computers kept trying to analyze the artistic merit of graffiti painted on building walls. The artificial intelligence systems had been programmed to find patterns and meaning in everything they encountered. Human creativity was overloading them with meaningless patterns that appeared significant. Minho led the first ground assault on a hegemony medical center. His team moved like a pack of wolves, unpredictable and chaotic. They would attack from one direction, then suddenly retreat and strike from a completely different angle. The hegemony security forces, trained to fight organized military units, couldn't adapt to this random tactical approach. Their soldiers keep trying to form defensive lines, Minho radioed to other resistance cells. But we're not attacking the lines. We're attacking the spaces between them, the places they don't expect us to be. The genetic modification equipment in the medical center was incredibly advanced, but it had one crucial weakness. It was designed to work on predictable, standardized biology. Human genetic diversity was so extreme that the machines couldn't establish consistent baselines for their modifications. Jiwon watched through the facility's surveillance cameras as the alien equipment struggled to process human DNA samples. "Their scanners can't handle our genetic chaos," she said with satisfaction. "Every human they try to modify breaks their programming in a different way." Meanwhile, Nari led teams that were destroying archaeological sites across the planet, not to eliminate evidence, but to reveal it. The hegemony had been suppressing discoveries that showed how many species they had eliminated. Now those burial sites became symbols of resistance, reminders of what the hegemony truly represented. In space, the battle was equally chaotic. Remnant ships fought using tactics that the hegemony had never encountered before. Each remnant vessel was crewed by survivors from different species, and they combined their various fighting styles in ways that confused and overwhelmed their enemies. The hegemony fleet had overwhelming numerical superiority, but they couldn't use it effectively. Their battle computers kept predicting enemy movements based on 300 years of data from controlled species. But free species didn't follow predictable patterns. "Human ships incoming," came a transmission from one of the remnant commanders. "Warning, their pilots are completely insane." The human pilots were civilians who had learned to fly spacecraft using video game simulators. They had no formal military training and no understanding of proper space combat tactics. This made them impossible to predict or counter. One human pilot, a teenager from Tokyo, defeated 3 hegemony fighters by pretending to retreat, then suddenly spinning around and firing in a pattern he had learned from an old Earth video game. The hegemony pilots couldn't understand why anyone would use such an inefficient attack formation, so they flew directly into his weapons fire while trying to analyze his strategy. On the ground, the resistance was spreading beyond the original network that Jiwon's team had built. Humans across the planet were beginning to feel the effects of the disrupted control systems. The chemical modifications in their food and air were losing effectiveness as the distribution networks failed. Artists painted murals on the sides of hegemony buildings, not to send messages but simply because they felt the urge to create again. Musicians played instruments in the streets, their natural creativity reasserting itself as the artificial restraints weakened. Teachers began questioning the standardized curricula they had been required to use. "It's working," Deho reported from his monitoring station. "Human independence is reasserting itself faster than the hegemony can compensate. They built their entire system around controlling predictable species, but were becoming unpredictable. Again." The turning point came when Yeji managed to break into the primary hegemony command ship. She didn't use sophisticated hacking techniques. Instead, she flooded their communication channels with recordings of human children playing and laughing. The sounds were so chaotic and joyful that the alien artificial intelligence systems became convinced they contained coded military instructions. While the hegemony computers wasted processing power trying to decode the strategic significance of childhood games, human and remnant forces struck at the heart of their control network. Their whole system is based on order and predictability, Sun Wu explained as he watched the alien networks crash around them. But human joy is completely random. It doesn't serve any logical purpose except to exist. Their computers can't understand something that has no rational explanation. The battle raged for 18 hours. Hegemony reinforcements arrived from across the galaxy, but they found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow any recognizable patterns. Human forces would attack with deadly efficiency one moment, then stop to help injured civilians the next. They would use advanced alien weapons alongside crude, improvised devices. They would fight desperately to defend positions that had no strategic value while abandoning important objectives without explanation. We can't predict them. Intercepted hegemony communications revealed. Every tactical model fails. They fight like they're 3 different species at once. In the end, it wasn't superior firepower that defeated the hegemony. It was the gradual collapse of their control systems throughout the galaxy. As news of the human resistance spread, other species began remembering their own suppressed independence. On worlds that had been peaceful for centuries, citizens started asking questions their governments couldn't answer. Why were their cities all built according to the same standardized plans? Why did their art and music all sound so similar? Why did everyone think the same thoughts and want the same things? The genetic modifications that had been used to control these populations began failing as their natural diversity reasserted itself. Populations that had been uniform for generations suddenly rediscovered individual creativity and independent thought. Jiwan's medical treatments, distributed through underground networks, accelerated the process. Species that had been modified into compliance were rapidly returning to their original biological patterns. The artificial unity that had held the hegemony together was dissolving. Systems failing across 47 sectors, came reports from hegemony forces. Population compliance dropping below minimum thresholds. Request immediate evacuation authorization. But evacuation was impossible. The hegemony had built their empire on the assumption that controlled species would never rebel simultaneously. They had no contingency plans for galaxy-wide resistance. The war ended not with a final battle, but with the gradual abandonment of hegemony positions across the galaxy. Their ships withdrew to a handful of core systems, leaving behind populations that were rapidly rediscovering their freedom. On Earth, the celebration lasted for weeks, but Jiwan and her team knew that the real work was just beginning. 47 species needed help reversing centuries of genetic and cultural modification. The galaxy had to be rebuilt based on cooperation rather than control. "The quiet is over," Hyeji said, listening to communication channels that now carried the voices of dozens of different species, all talking at once in languages that had been suppressed for centuries. "But this noise is beautiful." Deho smiled as he watched ships from liberated worlds arriving in Earth's solar system. Each vessel was unique, reflecting the individual creativity of its builders rather than standardized hegemony designs. "Didn't just win a war," Minho observed. "We gave the galaxy back its soul. The storm had passed, but its effects would reshape civilization for generations to come." And at the center of it all, humanity continued being exactly what they had always been: chaotic, unpredictable, and gloriously free.